So Ohio State's been playing a lot of noon games lately, and they're going to play a couple of more. In fact, they're playing one on Saturday against Northwestern in Chicago. So it'll be 11 a.m. their time, but it'll be noon Eastern time. They're also going to play at noon next week when they play Indiana. They're also going to play at noon the week after that when they play Michigan. They played on noon the week before this when they played Purdue, and they played at noon the week before that when they played at Penn State. Oh, yeah, and they played at noon when they played Nebraska when they came off the bye week. So many noon games. Stefan, how do we feel about the noon games? And is it a benefit or is it a detriment to Ohio State?
Well, first let's start off with what Ryan Day and Will Howard kind of said about the topic. They kind of said what you would expect. Play when you're asked to play. Will Howard actually said he does kind of prefer the noon game just because he can kind of get up and go as opposed to having to sit around all day and think about it. But Will Howard acknowledged something that is important. There is a fan aspect to this. There is a fan experience aspect to college football that's unlike any sport, whether it be tailgating or inside the actual stadium. It would be nice if Ohio State could get one night game that's not against Western Michigan, right? The Indiana game kind of seemed like a prime candidate for that because you had this stretch of noon games, and it was going to be a top 5 matchup, and you got a chance to get a night game at Ohio Stadium. And once that was established as a noon game, I think that's when you started to see the fans, at least through social media, kind of vocalize their thoughts a bit. And I understand their perspective. Joel Klatt has come out and spoken about, the TV ratings and everything that comes with the Big Noon. And I think from a financial and from an exposure aspect, yes, the Big Noon is very successful. You're on Fox. You're the biggest game on in that time slot. You're not competing with SEC at night or the SEC game that's at 3:30. I get all that, and Joel's very correct about all that. But again, there is a fan experience aspect to it of you turn on, you scroll through social media, or you turn on the TV and you see Neyland Stadium for Tennessee is having light shows and fireworks, and there's drone shows at stadiums, and like that stuff is cool for fans. Like, fans care about that stuff. They want to tailgate all day and then go and see that kind of stuff along with a very good football game. So I understand both sides of the argument. I get it, but sometimes the fans deserve, hey, we don't need 3 night games, but you can toss the fans a night game, and I think that's kind of where you're seeing some of this disagreement or some of this, the fan base that's upset because there's not one outside of Western Michigan that you've kind of thrown their way.
I wonder why those big noon games have been so highly rated. I wonder if it has to do with the fact of last year, the team you had on it, there was a cheating scandal, and so people were tuning in to maybe see them lose. And I wonder if the other team you put on there so much has such a big fan base that people are going to watch them whether you play at noon or they play at 4:30 in the morning, Joel. I wonder that. Let's see what that could be. What's the common denominator here is of why those ratings are so high. To your point, Will Howard's talking about not wanting to sit around all day before playing a game. I get that. And Ryan Day did what he was always going to do. Listen, I got enough other things that people are yelling at me about with this team. I'm not going to add what time we play football. I have enough other things. From a football standpoint, I don't know in terms of how this team plays, how much it impacts things, but it does impact fan environment, especially at Ohio Stadium, where it can be slow starts, can be a little sleepy to get there and start. But there is maybe the recruiting aspect of this where it seems to impact Ohio State the most, that they're playing so many games at noon for a team who recruits nationally.
Yeah, there's a lot here, and there's a lot to kind of unpack about kind of what this all means. You mentioned, the Michigan thing from last year. Michigan was not only the off the field stuff, they were also really good. They also had they were also really highly rated. So you're putting all of these programs in this noon slot, and that's, obviously one of the reasons why the ratings are higher. Number 2, I don't know if you heard, there are now Pacific Coast schools in the Big Ten. Those schools are not going to play 9 a.m. kickoff games. So you're still kind of keeping the original slot or the original Big Ten for all of these schools, right? They're not going to have Oregon kick off at 9 a.m. against Washington or Oregon against Ohio State. That's not going to be a 9 a.m. game. When it comes to recruiting, it makes things difficult, especially before November. When you get to November, it gets a little bit easier. High school seasons have ended. Families can leave after, a work day and a school day on a Friday, fly to Columbus, and then you're just in Columbus on Friday night. But if you want to come for a game day visit, which are unofficial visits that the school's not paying for or anything like that, unofficial visit, you would just want to see the game, come to campus. it is very difficult. Just think about it practically. It's very difficult to get from Miami, Florida to Columbus, Ohio for a noon game. If you play a Friday night football game at 7:30, that game's not over until late. You're not getting back till late. You can't leave on Friday. There's honestly probably maybe one flight that you can get to Columbus at that point. And truthfully, I made this case, off camera. It's actually probably easier for kids to get from like Georgia or Pennsylvania or Virginia or Texas or Florida to California for a game than to Columbus for a noon game whenever that happens. Now, this is not just an Ohio State issue. We saw shirts in Penn State, Big Noon sucks. Penn State fans are not happy about this. Ohio State fans are not happy about this. And they all have the same things. And one of those things is recruiting, because while a kid is not going to decide, I'm going to Michigan because they won the game that I was at, or I'm going to Ohio State or Penn State or wherever because they won when I was there. It does matter that you get, I don't know, a 10:30, 11 a.m. crowd versus a 7 p.m. crowd. What do you think? Who do you think's more jacked up? What do you think's a cooler crowd? The whiteout at Penn State or a 10:30 a.m. crowd for Ohio State, Indiana? Let's be real about this. So there's a lot that goes into recruiting. Listen more to Buckeye Talk because we have a lot to say about this, but it's just very difficult practically to get these kids on campus for these noon games.
I just want to add something too on the recruiting front. Like I talked about, Neyland Stadium specifically has been, they just keep getting night games, and LSU is kind of like that as well. They keep getting night games. You saw Georgia, Texas, a night game. Not only are these light shows and these fireworks like cool to see, but like if a recruit isn't there and they're scrolling on their phone, they're going to see it as well. Like these marketing teams and these video teams all across the country are next level now. They're putting out content like never before. And we've seen Ohio State post these videos of like the red flashing lights inside Ohio Stadium the night before a game to be like, 12 hours until kickoff or something like that. And you're just like, yeah, but all those lights are going to be not useful when the game actually starts. And that sucks for Ohio State. It sucks for the people who are trying to market the program and market the stadium, because Ohio Stadium is one of the best stadiums in the country. It's updated. It's been renovated when needed. It's got everything you need to have similar environments, and it's just not being put to use.
Again, it's not like your ratings are up because you had Rutgers and Northwestern at Big Noon. It's not. It's because you've had Ohio State and Michigan on your Big Noon games consistently. And Colorado, apparently. To the point about the recruiting things, here's why it's an issue. And, Andrew, you kind of touched on this. So Ohio State, when you're talking about the big games that have been at night, you think Notre Dame in 2022, and that environment was electric. LeBron freaking James was here. Jason Tatum was here. Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, all those guys were at this game. Do all those guys get here if it's a noon game? Who knows? I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But it's the fact that you can say so quickly, no, they're not going to be here. Penn State in 2021, electric environment. Ohio State pulled out these all-red jerseys. It was cool. Michigan State 2019. And the reason I bring up the 2019 game is because that's the game C.J. Stroud made his unofficial visit on. And that's a kid from California. He's told this story. He played a night game on Friday night in California and got on a plane, still in his football gear, and got his way to Columbus for a night game. He doesn't make that trip if that Michigan State game in 2019 is at noon. And that's not saying he doesn't eventually end up at Ohio State, because he did come back from an official visit in December and whatnot. But that's what we're talking about here. Even a night game. That's how C.J. Stroud, a kid from Southern California, had to go about things. I got to finish this game and go straight to the airport. Hope there's an 11:30 flight for me to get here, and then get here, and then get dressed, then take a shower, then reprieve, and then go watch a game that night.
Well, and just real quick, I mean, think about it. Like if you're put yourself in the shoes of a 17-year-old, 16-year-old kid who, you're going with a teammate to a big football game, and you're recruited by everybody in the country. If you're from LA and all of a sudden you're looking at the schedule going, Ohio State's playing Indiana this week, and I would have to leave on a red eye, and I would get zero sleep, and I would go to Columbus.
I'm staying home.
Or I can fly to Portland and drive 2 hours because Oregon doesn't play till 4:30 local. Or I can fly to Texas because I can just go straight to Austin, and they don't play till 7:30 local. Like, just think about it for a second. It is very difficult practically to try and make some of these visits happen.
Ohio State's one of the best. We got to wrap this up. We'll continue to have this conversation on Buckeye Talk. Ohio State's one of the best teams in the country, probably the biggest brand in college football, and they've rarely played at night in some of its biggest games of the season. Every fan has a reason to be upset about that. Every fan has a reason to be frustrated about that. And there are people in this building who are probably frustrated about that because of how it impacts how they have to go about scheduling recruits, which is why there's such an emphasis on the Michigan game this year and getting as many kids as possible for what is still a noon game. But you've also had 9 months to plan for that because you know that game's always going to be at noon. Get the text 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. Stefan, Andrew, I'm Steven. We'll continue to have this conversation on Buckeye Talk wherever you find podcasts. And Ohio State plays on the road in Wrigley Field, Northwestern this weekend. See you there.